you for joining for this episode of the TechSpective Podcast. My guest is Dean Hager. So, Dean, if you want to introduce yourself and a little bit about your background and the company.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Tony. I really appreciate it. My name is Dean Hager, as you mentioned, and I'm the CEO of Jamf, a company whose mission is to help organizations succeed with Apple. I've been with Jamf now for 8 years, and I am closing in on a 34-year career in high tech that has spanned 4 different companies, but always been in the mix of just trying to provide great solutions to IT and security teams, and have been doing that for the last year with Jamf as well.
Okay, so the I think the unique thing about Jamf, which is definitely relatively unique from my perspective. The unique thing is the focus on Apple, so it's like enterprise tech, but with an Apple perspective. So let's talk a little bit more about that, like specifically, like why, first of all, what does Jamf do, and why is there this specific focus on Apple?
Yes, thank you for the question. And as I mentioned, our mission is to help organizations succeed with Apple. And what is an organization? Anything with 2 or more people, excuse me, whether that be businesses, whether that be schools or hospitals or governments. We focus on organizations. And one of the reasons why we do is because Apple does such a wonderful job of focusing on the individual. We will sometimes differentiate between what Apple does and Jamf does by saying Apple focuses on the person and Jamf focuses on the people. Our strategy is to manage and secure Apple at Work, serving both IT teams and InfoSec teams. And the $64 million question of why Apple really comes back to our core purpose as an organization. Our core purpose as an organization is to simplify work. We just do not feel that there was once a day where like all your great computing equipment was at work and at home you were just trying to catch up. That has flip-flopped in the last 10, 15 years. Some will say that we're now the Jetsons at home and the Flintstones at work. Well, we don't think it should be that way. We think that work technology should achieve the core purpose of what technology is, and that is to simplify work. And if you're going to do that, what better than to decide to specialize in consumer simple technology? And that's what Apple is. We could go try to make the enterprise simpler, or we could embrace consumer technology and bring it into the enterprise. So that's really the first reason why we focus on Apple. The second reason why we focus on Apple really has to do with the word focus. By focusing in on Apple, we are able to use core native Apple technology to accomplish things at work that simply would be, impossible or extremely difficult without using that native Apple technology, like what comes with Apple Business Manager. And then the third reason that we focus on Apple at Work is because, frankly, we believe that, 10, 15 years from now, Apple's going to be the dominant device within the enterprise. I mean, it's already made, you will remember what it was like 15 years ago where the enterprise was absolutely dominated by Windows. Well, today, Windows represents less than half of the internet hits that occurs within work. It's actually Apple devices that have come pouring into the enterprise, and we think that momentum is going to continue. And the leader in the enterprise will be those in 10 years that do Apple best. So for all those reasons, we specialize in Apple.
Okay. Well, I guess sort of focusing on the first reason to some extent to start out. That the thing that resonates to me with that is in the kind of the beginning of the BYOD movement, was corporations and IT in particular kind of pushing back and saying, no, we issue computers, we issue phones, and when you're here, you just use our stuff. And I mean, and back in the day when I was, working at EDS, I had actually at one point, I think I had 3 cell phones, because I had my own cell phone, and then I had like my EDS cell phone, and then there was like a separate cell phone for the customer that I was, working with. And, and then I had two computers, I had my personal laptop and my work laptop. And that's cumbersome. I mean, so from the user perspective, I'm like, no, I would much rather use my computer. Like there's a reason it's my computer. Like I looked at all of the options available, and that's the one that resonated with me. That's the computer I chose because I like it. Same thing with my cell phone. And so from the user perspective, that makes total sense. It's like, well, why wouldn't I just use the thing that I like and that I'm comfortable with? From the corporate perspective, it's like, well, okay, but I need to be able to manage that. I need to be able to monitor that. I need to be able to secure that. And it's that kind of trying to find that balance. And overall, it seems if you just follow kind of the trajectory of the BYOD, movement, revolution, whatever, it seems that, the consumer or the individual kind of won that battle in most cases. There are companies that just don't even issue laptops unless they have to. They're like, well, do you already have a laptop? Then I don't need to give you one. So, with all of that in mind, how does that tie back to, like, how do you take that? How do you take, like, okay, well, I happen to like my iPhone. I have, and I mean, I don't currently have a MacBook, but I've had MacBooks, and it's like, so if I say, well, I like my iPhone, I like my MacBook, how does that fit into an enterprise security stack? How do you manage that part? And what are the kind of the challenge? Like, what are the challenges you guys see, and how that balance affects an organization?
Sure. Well, the whole BYOD movement, I mean, let's face it, had Apple never come along with the iPhone, I don't know when BYOD would have ever happened. The BYOD happened with iPhone. It was the first device that came along that, employees actually said, I don't want a BlackBerry. I want to use this. This is what I bought in my home. And it was really the first time employees sort of won that fight. They brought their consumer technology with the phone and said they wanted to start using that for work. And Apple, you could argue that the entire movement of Apple at work has been a choice movement. If you go back, and if I was going to be really honest, the majority of Windows users at work today are Windows users because that's what they were issued. Right? The majority of Apple users at work today are using Apple because that's what they chose. And that's one of the things that has always been important to Apple. They actually don't like a world where people are just issued against their will Apple equipment. Going all the way back to what Steve Jobs used to say, and the reason he didn't like the enterprise is he wanted to build great products and then have people choose those products. He didn't like the enterprise because people didn't choose. Well, the iPhone started to change that, and it's been changing it ever since. And we actually see 2 different types of programs where user preference comes in. One is a BYOD, to your point, and the other is CYOD, or choose your own device. There are some organizations, especially with the Mac, that they'll say, hey, you know what, we'll buy it for you, but we're going to give you a catalog of computers to choose from, and you can choose your choice. And both of those then create that model of user choice. However, whether it is a choose your own program and the company buys it, or a bring your own device and you buy it, in both cases, if you don't let that user have the consumer experience with that device, the program's going to fail because they're not going to get the reason why they chose that device. And what do you want as a personal user. You want to upgrade to the latest operating system you want. You want to know that your privacy is protected. You want to you want to have the apps on there that you want to have. You don't want the organization putting so many rules on you that it's breaking the experience that you have with the device. And in the world of BYOD specifically, one of the reasons that's been such a broken model for so long is there were really only two different ways to prepare that BYOD device for work. Either ignore it, which, let it be a rogue device used for work, in which case you have security issues, or fully manage and fully secure it, which in that case, the user is walking around with kind of creepy privacy violations because their location can be tracked, including on weekends, by their IT team. And, they don't like that. So how do you strike the balance between letting it be a consumer private device and yet being an enterprise secure device? And Apple came up with a technology a couple of years ago called user enrollment that allowed a user, for as long as they had enterprise software like Jamf that supports it, which very few do, a user can user enroll their BYO device, and Jamf will then partition that in half using native Apple technologies, and half of it will be completely personal and half of it will be completely enterprise secure and work, but you as a user are only carrying one device. And ultimately, we're hoping to end the tyranny of forcing people to carry two iPhones, because it's just not necessary anymore.
Yeah, I certainly haven't had to do that for a very long time, but like way back when, when I was a network admin at McCann Erickson around 1999, 2000, we had 250 total, seats, and basically about 200 of them were Windows PCs, and but we also had it's an advertising agency. We had a creative department. The creative department had Macs, and my take at the time was, from an IT support perspective, I'm like, all right, I got just as many calls. There's always been this sort of quasi-religious debate about Windows versus Mac, and my perspective, both from the network admin IT support angle and from the time when I had when I used a MacBook Air for a few years, is I was like, you know what, they're in my opinion, they're both good, they're both fine. They both have kind of an equal number of issues. They're just different issues and challenges. It's just choose your poison. But I do subscribe to and profess to others, choose your poison. But once you do, try to stay in the same ecosystem, because it just simplifies everything. And I violate my own thing because I have Apple everything, Apple Watch, I've got an iPhone, I've got Apple, I've got HomePods, I've got CarPlay, I'm using Apple everything except for my PC. And so I violate my own principle, but in general, I'm it just simplifies everything. If everything is just automatically synced together, I don't have to try to get everything to play nicely together. I know that everything just kind of works, and you can achieve that if you double down on Google and Android. You can achieve it if you double down on Mac and iPhone. But whatever you pick, better to go all in.
I wholeheartedly agree, and I agree it's also a religious debate. So my philosophy is, don't engage in the religious debate. Provide freedom of religion. Let your users actually choose the ecosystem that they want to invest in. And I think, well, by the way, one day I think you'll probably fold over on your PC as well, because it is a delight to have all of your devices within the same ecosystem, and be able to just, whether it be exchanging of data, whether it be displaying up to an Apple TV screen, which is what is behind me, whatever whether it be if I were to decide to quickly throw on my headphones so I could hear you better. Everything is just so simple, and it doesn't matter whether it's my phone, my Mac, or my iPad. And what Jamf's objective is is to create that same exact simplicity that you have in your home, but actually be able to take advantage of all of those things at work. But once you treat Apple from a management and security perspective like Windows, so to your point, embrace the ecosystem. Well, I would say from an IT perspective, amen, but embrace the system that specializes in that ecosystem so that you get the experience of that ecosystem. And nobody does Windows better than Microsoft. Full management and security, embrace the Microsoft stack. And from an Apple perspective, full management and security, nobody does Apple like Jamf does, preserving that Apple experience, which at the end of the day is flat out different than Windows and requires a different level of specialization.
Well, and that brings me, my next question was going to be, so, okay, well, how is Jamf addressing these challenges? Because, again, going back, now granted, that was 23 years ago that I was dealing with it, but even in other organizations that I've seen even more recently, though, I feel like a lot of times, like I've seen a lot of choose your own device, like you're talking about, and I've been in organizations where, when you're doing your onboarding, they're like, we're going to issue you a laptop. Do you want this Dell or do you want this MacBook? So, it is an option you're given. But a lot of times I feel like from the IT perspective, like when it comes to networking and, network shares and stuff, that the back end still tends to be PC centric. Definitely in a lot of cases, office centric. And maybe that's much more me because I'm not a Google Docs fan. I don't like that whole ecosystem. So I'm good with Office 365. But when I was using the MacBook, I recognized that you would run into some hurdles. You'd be like, well, I'm using Office 365, but like if you're used to using it on a Windows PC, that you would run into things where you're like, well, why doesn't this work the way I want it to work? And so all of that's a very long way of saying, I feel like a lot of organizations might offer you the option to use a Mac, but they're still trying to kind of shoehorn it into the Windows world. They're basically saying, well, you can use this Mac, but you have to use it like it's a Windows PC.
Right, at which point you just ruin the experience of the Mac. And I think what you're saying is true on two sides. One is the app side, and the other is the management and security side. And Jamf's taking care of the management and security side. On the app side, very quickly, obviously I'm speaking to you on an Apple device right now, but yet we're using Microsoft Teams. Microsoft has invested heavily. They view Apple devices as tier 1 devices in the enterprise. You don't have to believe me. Microsoft has been really sending this message boldly that their intent is to make those Office apps work, equally across Windows and Apple devices. So they put a lot of work into that, and it's only going to get better. I'm a huge Microsoft 365 user here at Jamf, but yet I have all Apple devices. So there's a difference between the apps and the devices, and I think Microsoft has been doing a great job filling that app gap. On the management and security side, again, let's face it, if you look at the last 20 years, the market share for the number of users using Windows to access the internet at work has been on a steady decline. And the two things that have been on a steady rise over the last 20 years has been Mac devices and mobile devices. So our first intent when it comes to management and security is to acknowledge that most of the world focuses on that declining ecosystem. And we're like, great, we're not going to try and compete with you there. We'll coexist with whatever Windows ecosystem you have in place. Our favorite is when they put Microsoft themselves in place, because we have over a dozen integrations with Microsoft and we coexist very well. Our second area that we're trying to attack and kind of fix the enterprise when it comes to Apple is management and security together. It's a weird thing, but IT teams don't necessarily secure the devices. The team that's making decisions on securing devices is the InfoSec team. And there are many times where that InfoSec team and those IT teams don't work very well together. Well, we're trying to bring them together by actually providing a single platform that manages and secures Apple in the enterprise. And in doing so, you have the same system that is assessing risk as you have that is mitigating the risk. Security and management, we're able to then create a better automated flow of IT policies and security policies. And then the third thing that we're attempting to address with our approach is just the total cost. If you're buying management from one vendor and security from another vendor, it is going to run more expensive than if you're just buying the Jamf stack for Apple. So it's going to be less cost right up front. In addition, we're going to bring together those two teams, the InfoSec and IT teams, to actually collaborate for the best way to have software running on those devices. And then, the third reason is just if you look at the cost of a security event, not only do you have to integrate these systems together, but they're not all real time. You've built integration between management and security. If there is a security event, that's the greatest cost of all. I mean, your whole business could be sacrificed. So we are investing in the growing ecosystem. We are bringing together the IT and InfoSec teams, and we are lowering the cost by lowering the out-of-pocket money, lowering the needs to do integration, and reducing the risk for a security event within the organization.
Okay. So walk me through, so if I'm, so first of all, I agree with you that I think the perception is often that IT is just this like overarching, there's IT and they manage security. It's like in a lot of cases, especially in, the larger the enterprise, the less likely that is. There's an IT team that is managing infrastructure. They're doing switches and routers and servers and whatever. And then there's a security team that's doing their own thing. And they don't, there's certainly a Venn diagram of them working together, but their agendas are not always aligned. From the IT, so let's talk about then. Jamf is kind of, you're doing a little bit of both, right?
Yes, exactly. So
how do you coordinate that? How does that work? Like who's the primary user? Is it the IT team or the IT security team, or is it just both?
Right. Well, in smaller organizations where you do have one team that does it all, it's obvious. And SMB, small to medium businesses, in those businesses, it is frequently one team. You're exactly right. In the larger, it's both teams, and it is both. But it means that we're actually giving both of those teams, an olive branch to hand out to the other one, a method of working together that actually makes sense. If you think about it, security software is identifying potential vulnerabilities, whether that be malware, whether that be a phishing attack, whether that be malicious download, whether that be misuse of the system. That's what security software is doing, is trying to protect from those things and also trying to identify if any of those things have happened. Now, how do you mitigate? How do you solve a problem if you've identified a risk? Well, there's a few things that you might do. You might block that computer from accessing any of the enterprise resources for fear that the malware could infect, other computers. You might decide to remove software from that computer. You might decide that you need to upgrade software on the computer to be at the latest level. Well, what's the tool that's used to do all those mitigations? That's IT management software. That's management software. So by having the security software that identifies and attempts to protect from those risks, and management software that does the software updates, the network blocking, all the things to mitigate from the risk, you actually have a real-time communication between these two systems. And as a result of that, Jamf is actually the only company I'm aware of that has the ability to block access from a user from accessing the device itself within seconds. If we think that device is so at risk that we should immediately lock the screen and prevent any further usage of that device, Jamf has that ability in seconds. In addition, we can actually block from network resources that we have control over within seconds as well. So if you want people to still use the device but not access the network, we can block there. And then we have partnerships with Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, where they'll actually check with Jamf to see if a device is safe before allowing the device to access their cloud resources. So we can block users based on compatibility issues or compliance issues or security vulnerabilities at the device, the network, and the cloud level. And I don't know anybody else that can do that. And one of the reasons that we can do that is because we combine this world of security and management together.
Okay. I guess, one of the questions I had was kind of like so I just asked the question kind of who's the primary customer, but like who benefits the most from Jamf, and like, is it the end user? Is it the IT team? Is it the IT security team? Like, or just all of the above. And on that note, though, I also wanted to go back to something you talked about earlier about how, if I have a BYOD situation and the company, puts their stuff on there and they're monitoring, which I've seen, especially from an email perspective, like they want to put their profiles on the iPhone and kind of like lock down the email access. And and there are obviously, like you said, privacy concerns with, or I don't necessarily want everyone to know where I'm going or have access to like my photos or whatever. And so the ability to split that is, as you pointed out, is great, and say, okay, well, here's the corporate stuff, and we're not going to look at your personal stuff. The question I had on that was, where does location fit on that? Like when Apple splits it down the middle and says, okay, here's the corporate stuff, is location still part of it? Because I still feel like that's a kind of a privacy issue.
That's a good question. That's a good question. So this device that I have in my hand right now is a BYO device. I bought it myself. It's an iPhone 14 Pro Max. And the reason why I buy my own iPhones is because I want to, I don't want to move to an iPhone every 3 years. I may want to. I mean, my last one was the iPhone 11. So in that case, I waited 3 years. But if Apple comes out with something really exciting, maybe I move to the 15. But I want that to be my choice. So I always buy my own device. But it is BYO enrolled with Jamf, meaning that every single app that I load from the App Store, IT can't even see. But yet, if I go into Jamf self-service and load apps from there, those are going to be automatically secured, full enterprise security for using this as a work device. My work mail is fully enterprise secured. My Google Mail is 100% personal and private. And to ask your specific question, location tracking, they can't do it on me. Because after all, at the end of the day, if I do lose this device, all that needs to happen from an IT perspective is they need to hit the unenroll button, and it will wipe all of the work stuff off this device. But the personal side is my responsibility. I can maybe go into Find My, and I can find my phone. If I decide that I want to put it in the lost mode, I can do that. That's all my choice. I paid for it. Work doesn't need to know where this device is. They just need to be able to prevent any of the work data from getting into somebody else's hands and they have control of that. So that's to answer your very specific question. Your broader question on who benefits the most, of course, I mean, the three groups that benefit are the InfoSec team, the IT team, and the end users. And one of the things that I always say about the technology that we're trying to provide is we want to provide technology that users love and that the organization trusts. And that organization side is really the InfoSec team and the IT teams working together. We want them to have complete confidence every time the end user is using that device to access work resources, and they want to know that that's completely secure and that the access is encrypted and the user is who they say they are. They want to trust that completely, make sure there's no malware on the device, there's no phishing attempt on that device, all of those things. But the thing that gets me jazzed, the benefit that makes me really excited, goes back to our purpose of simplifying work. It's that end user who's carrying the device. They're the ones that now get to choose to use the device that they want, and it works in an enterprise consumer or in a consumer simple way. And they can upgrade to the latest operating system when they want to, and they can use all the fun personal consumer bells and whistles on the device. And as you mentioned, they can do that for their whole ecosystem, and it just works so nicely together. It affects work, right? I mean, back in the day, your work environment was your office environment, the coffee corner at work. It was, all of the things in the facility, in the office environment. Let's face it, your technology environment today is the employee experience. So if you're an employer and you want to create the greatest employee experience, you are going to give the end user the greatest technology experience. And if they are on the Apple side of that religious belief system, you are not going to achieve that by giving them a Windows device. You're just not. I have three daughters. They're all in their 20s. And this is, by the way, we actually are great partners with Microsoft, and we have great integrations with them. We exist wonderfully with them. But my 24-year-old daughter recently got promoted at work. She has used a Mac her entire life. And she called me to tell me about her new job and how much she loves it. And she said the only thing that she doesn't like is in that particular job, they haven't set her up yet to use her own personal Mac. She said, they gave me something else. And I said, well, what did they give you? And she said, I don't know, but it just feels old. And I said, is there a start button in the lower left-hand corner? And she said, yes. I said, you're using Windows. I mean, she is 24, a college graduate. It's the first time that she's ever used Windows in her life. And she can't wait for the day when her work sets her up to use her own personal Mac in order to do that job with that app. That's where things are going. And you have a whole bunch of college graduates out there that have literally been using a Mac, since they could walk practically. Think about it. We have our first iPod babies entering the workforce. The iPod was invented 2001 to 2002. That was the beginning of Apple's resurgence. Well, how old are they now? They're 20 years old. They're getting internships. So we've got our first group of iPod babies entering the workforce. They've used Apple their entire life and nothing else.
Yeah. Well, so to back up a little bit to what you're talking about in terms of the devices, that aligns with, like I've said for a long time that, back in the day, mobile device management, that's a whole genre of cybersecurity and IT management solutions. But even then, I used to be like, okay, but as the company, if I'm the CISO, whatever, like, I don't actually care that much about your device. And that's true of the laptop, whether it's a laptop or a mobile phone or whatever. Like, I don't care. Like, I do care. I mean, obviously there's an expense there, but I don't care that much about the device. I can replace the device. All I really want to do is protect the data. Like that's it. As long as I can like make sure that the data is encrypted and secure, or that I have an ability to wipe the data. Like if someone steals a laptop, so be it. I'll buy a new one.
You're absolutely right. Amen, brother. That is, if you can create an environment where the user is using exactly what they want and how they want to use it, and it feels like when they get their work computer, if they get a work computer, the feeling from the very moment they get the work computer is exactly the feeling as if they went out and bought their own. It's in the shrink wrap. IT has never touched it. They unwrap it, they unbox it, they power it on, and it powers up automatically on first power on to have all of the apps that are needed, all of the connection points that are needed, and all the security that's needed. But yet the whole experience from unboxing forward felt like a consumer experience. That exists today, and IT can feel completely, and InfoSec can feel completely comfortable that the data is protected and the user gets their delightful consumer experience.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, and for a while now, I mean, not everyone. This is not like an inherently native setup for Windows and Office 365, but the way I've set mine up, because I know what I'm doing. Actually, I wish Microsoft would make it inherently native, because it's a beautiful setup. Like a number of years back, I went in and redirected all of the default folders. So like desktop, documents, music, etc. Those are default folders that exist on the C drive. I redirected them all to the exact same name folders, but on OneDrive. So by default, if I save something on my desktop, it's on OneDrive. If I put something in my documents, it's on OneDrive. And so I'm not doing anything different. I don't have to like consciously remember to put things in OneDrive. Everything is just automatically there. And I could literally dump my coffee on my computer right now, pick up any other computer and log in as myself, and everything will just be there. Like when I get a new computer, it takes me like 30 minutes to be like up and running with everything is exactly where I wanted it. It's exactly how I use it. And I don't have to like start from scratch.
You're absolutely. Remember back in the day when you had this, like if you left a job, the most important thing to negotiate on the way out the door was not how long your benefits lasted, but could you keep your laptop? Because the thought of having to switch laptops was just such an enormous, if you were to ever lose it, your life was on it. I agree. Sitting in front of me right now is my iPhone, which you've seen. I'm talking to you on my iPad, and this display behind me is actually off of an Apple TV that broadcast PowerPoint slide from my MacBook. So I literally have, and I'm wearing my watch, of course. I have every Apple device at work in front of me for this discussion, and all of them. I'm on a second floor right now. I could chuck out the window onto a cement and break them completely. And I could go pick a brand new box. Yeah, I could drive over to Apple Retail. I could buy a new one of all three. And by midday today, I'm going to be exactly where I am right now, because I also am a OneDrive user, and I just automatically save everything there because I automatically have it on every device. And it's consumer simple.
Right. Well, and so let's kind of segue to that a little bit. Like and it's kind of backing up to the beginning, but I want to get your opinion on it. Your general philosophy on employee happiness, the choice of productivity and corporate sustainability. So it kind of ties back to what we started with. It kind of ties back to what you were just talking about with your daughter. And I think increasingly, like you pointed out with the iPod generation, like with the younger people who are entering the workforce have different expectations. They have when I entered the workforce and someone said, "Hey, here's your behemoth, IBM PC knockoff desktop computer, I didn't question that. But now that's like a negotiation point on, for hiring someone. That's a question that comes up in an interview. It's like, well, what device am I going to have to use? And if they say, well, we're going to give you this, HP Windows laptop or whatever, some people will be like, yeah, that's okay. I got this offer from these guys over here. They're going to let me use a Mac.
Our surveys show that we have reached a time where people are not allowed to use the technology they want. And we've asked questions specifically about the Mac. Would you leave a job, or would you take a job based on them allowing you to use a Mac for work? And actually the majority of respondents say, yes, that would matter that much to me. The gall, the gall of employees now feeling they should have a voice and a choice at work. And yet they're right. A lot of people, especially my age, will complain that, why do these people entering the workforce now think they should have that? I took what I was given and I liked it, doggone it. Well, that doesn't make that a better time. How awesome is it to be able to have a technology environment and work where you want, and yet feel secure and feel your best self, your most productive, and still be able to connect with people the way that you and I are connected with people. Again, I'll go back in the day, the office that I was given at work was my employee experience. Today, this is my employee experience. So make it a great one. And if a security organization is choosing to secure their organization and not care about the user experience, trust me, they're actually making their organization less secure. I'll give you one simple example. I was a CEO for another company before I was CEO for Jamf 8 years ago. And the day that I joined that company, I found that it was a really, really highly secure organization. And one of their policies was you could not send an attachment in their email to anyone outside of the company.
Right.
And within the first week that I was there, I absolutely had to send an attachment, and I had to do it quickly. So what did I do? I went to my Google personal mail and I attached the document there and I sent it. So in other words, because security took the approach of what they're going to stop from doing rather than what they're going to securely allow to be done, they actually made their organization less secure, because people will find a way. There was a quote in Jurassic Park by Jeff Goldblum saying, nature will find a way. Well, in the workforce, nature is employees. And if you don't provide them a secure way to do something that is also pleasant from a user perspective, they will find another way, and that other way will make you less secure. And that's fundamentally what Jamf is trying to solve in the workplace.
Okay. I was going to say, I absolutely agree. And I think that's actually kind of the convergence of two different trends. So yes, there's the trend of BYOD and more acceptance and incorporation of Apple and other devices in the broader ecosystem. That's one trend. The other trend is just that over my background is cybersecurity. Like over the last 20 years, security has evolved a lot. I mean, it matured a lot in that respect. Where 20 years ago it was much more, we are security. This is how we're going to be secure, and it was more draconian. Like we are implementing policies, and you will follow these policies. But it leads to all the things like you just described, and it creates all kinds of rogue IT situations. So that's how people and people do like you said, where you go to your Gmail and you just attach it there. People also just started opening up their own like Dropbox accounts on the company network and being like, all right, well, I'm just gonna put it over here on Dropbox then. And IT didn't even know Dropbox existed. But things have evolved. I think security much more today, security professionals, CISOs, everyone has matured some to understand that the job of security is to facilitate business in a secure way. It's not to just be secure for the sake of security.
You stated it perfectly. To do business in a secure way, and to do business, the subtext of that is the reason why technology was deployed in the first place. And I go back all the way back to the 80s when I jumped into high tech. The reason why you got computers was to do your job better. That's the reason why it existed. And so therefore, if security and IT teams have that same attitude today, everything you receive should be making your employment experience great, should allow you to do your job in the optimal way and feel awesome when you're doing it. But we have to provide you a path that is also secure for the organization. Everybody has that attitude, and the things that you can do today are remarkable. The organizations that are behind in that thinking are also the organizations that provide technology and approaches to doing work that is what I experienced when I joined the workforce in the 1980s. Just here's what you're going to get, and whether you enjoy the experience or not is not our problem. That has changed. Thankfully, that has changed.
Okay. All right. So I want to start to wind down, but let's talk then about what's kind of what's the future look like? What's next for Jamf? What's on the horizon?
Yeah. So today, Jamf serves. Excuse me again. Today, Jamf serves over 72,000 customers running over 30 million devices around the world. So our presence within the market has definitely now evolved to being a market leader. And as a matter of fact, the two leaders in the area of device management are really Microsoft and Jamf. And they're the only two providers that also focus on an ecosystem. Microsoft focusing most on Windows, Jamf focusing most on Apple. They're also the only two providers that both do management and security in the enterprise. So we're really similar from that perspective. We just come at it from a Apple and Windows perspective. When I look forward and predict where Jamf's going to be in the future, we're going to go from the number of customers we have today to something even greater. We're going to go from the number of devices we have today to something even greater. But more importantly, the way that we're going to do that is by continuing to create experiences where if you flip up that lid on your Mac and you put your finger on that sensor and all of a sudden you're logged in and all your messaging is encrypted, and yet you never had to even think about connecting to work. You never even had to think about firing up your security software. You never even had to really think about authenticating. It's just automatic. There's a term that's used in the Apple world saying it just works. That's actually that has not been something that's used very often in the enterprise. It just works. But with Jamf, that's our objective, is that people would describe their work environment as being one that just works. And we're not done. Every company and every geography is providing their users that choice.
Okay. All right. I do have one final question, which is just really kind of a trivia question that's been weighing on my mind. What is Jamf? Like, how'd that name come about?
We are a classic old college student founder story. Jamf was founded in 2002 by a gentleman named Zach Homestead, who was a music major in college, went down to work for the local IT team, and he started working with Macs, and that's when he wrote the first software that became Jamf. He was reading a book at the time called Gravity's Rainbow, and there was a character in the book named Laszlo Jamf, Jamf. And for whatever reason, it stuck with him. And he named the company that he was founding that name. You know, tech companies are allowed to have weird names, I suppose. But the Jamf stands for nothing. It was the last name of a character in a book. But what's been fun over the years is people creating their own meaning of Jamf. You know, Jamf's Apple Management Framework. That's sort of an iterative version. Just another Mac fan would be another one. But it means nothing and it means everything at the same time. It means what you want it to mean.
Awesome. All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining me. I think it was a fun conversation. So yeah, I appreciate you taking the time.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me, Tony. Have a great day.
All right. I appreciate you investing your time to listen to the podcast, but I also invite you to engage on social media. Please go like our Facebook page and follow at TechSpective on Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, let me know if you love it, let me know if it sucks, and let me know what products you'd like to see reviewed or what questions you'd like to see answered in future posts.